The letter arrived on a Tuesday, sealed in an envelope yellowed by time, its edges frayed like a wound that refused to heal. Ethan Carter, 28, stood frozen in his small Chicago apartment, the paper trembling in his hands as he read the words that shattered his world. His grandmother, Evelyn Carter, had left him nothing, not a dime of her vast estate, because he was gay. The sting wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal of a woman he'd loved fiercely, whose warm hugs and sharp wit had shaped his childhood. Ethan's knees buckled, and he sank onto the threadbare couch, the city's hum fading outside his window. His boyfriend, Lucas Reed, knelt beside him, his green eyes searching Ethan's face. "She can't do this to you," Lucas whispered, his voice a tether in the storm. But she had. Evelyn's will, read by a cold-voiced lawyer over the phone, cited moral misalignment as the reason for cutting Ethan out. The estate, millions in assets, the old family mansion in Lake Forest, and a legacy of Carter wealth, went to his cousins, who'd never hidden their disdain for his lifestyle. The injustice burned. Ethan had spent summers at Evelyn's sprawling estate, tending her rose garden, listening to her stories of post-war America, her fierce independence as a widow who'd built a real estate empire. She'd called him her brightest star, yet her final act branded him an outcast. Lucas, ever steady, squeezed his hand. "We'll fight this," he said, his jaw set. But Ethan wasn't sure where to begin, until a memory sparked. Evelyn had always said, "Words have power, Ethan. Use them wisely." That night, as rain lashed the windows, Ethan made a vow. He'd write 145 letters, one for every month he'd loved his grandmother, and send them to every Carter family member, exposing their hypocrisy, their secrets, and the truth about who Evelyn really was. The next morning, Ethan sat at his cluttered desk, a photo of him and Evelyn from his 16th birthday propped beside his laptop. Her silver hair gleamed in the sunlight, her smile wide as she handed him a leather-bound journal. "Write your heart out," she'd said. Now that journal lay open, its pages filled with stories of their bond, stories he'd weave into his letters. Lucas brewed coffee, his presence a quiet anchor as Ethan began the first letter. "Dear Aunt Margaret," he typed, his fingers trembling with rage and resolve. "You called me an abomination at Thanksgiving. But did you know Grandma kept my coming-out letter framed in her study?" Each word was a dagger carefully aimed. Ethan didn't just write about his pain. He dug into the family's buried truths. Aunt Margaret's gambling debts, which Evelyn had quietly paid off. Cousin Paul's shady business deals, overlooked because he was the golden son. Ethan's letters were meticulous, each one tailored to its recipient, exposing their flaws while reminding them of Evelyn's love for him, a love they'd ignored. Lucas read the drafts, his feedback sharp but kind. "This one's too angry," he'd say, or "This hits just right." Together, they crafted a campaign of truth that would either mend or break the Carter family forever. By the end of the first week, Ethan had written 10 letters, each one a catharsis. He mailed them in crisp white envelopes, his heart pounding as he dropped them into the mailbox. The responses came swiftly, some furious, some silent. Aunt Margaret called, her voice shrill, accusing him of slander. Cousin Paul sent a single text, "You're dead to us." But Ethan kept writing, his resolve hardening. Lucas, ever his rock, suggested they take a break one evening, driving to a quiet lakeside outside the city. Under a fading sunset, they stood hand in hand, the water lapping at their feet. "You're doing the right thing," Lucas said, his voice soft but certain. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of his mission but also the warmth of Lucas's love, a love his family couldn't erase. The letters began to ripple. Cousin Sarah, the quiet one, called Ethan late one night, her voice thick with tears. "I didn't know Grandma kept your picture by her bed," she said. "I'm sorry." Sarah's words were a crack in the family's armor, a sign that Ethan's truth was piercing through. He wrote more, each letter a blend of pain and hope, recounting memories of Evelyn's kindness. How she'd donated to local shelters, how she'd secretly funded Ethan's art school tuition when his parents refused. He wasn't just fighting for the inheritance. He was fighting for her memory, for the woman who'd loved him until, somehow, she hadn't. As the weeks passed, Ethan's apartment became a war room, strewn with drafts and research. Lucas helped him track down addresses, even for distant cousins in California and Maine. The 50th letter was to Uncle Robert, the family patriarch, who'd once told Ethan he'd burn in hell. Ethan's words were searing. "Grandma taught me to forgive, but she also taught me to stand up. You betrayed her values, not me." Sending that letter felt like shedding a weight Ethan had carried for years. Lucas pulled him into a hug, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." In that moment, Ethan knew this fight wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming his place in a family that had tried to erase him. The backlash grew fiercer as Ethan's letters spread. His phone buzzed with voicemails, some pleading, others venomous. Cousin Laura, who'd always been neutral, sent an email. "Stop this, Ethan. You're tearing us apart." But Ethan couldn't stop. Each letter was a piece of his soul, a plea for the family to see him. Not as a sinner, but as Evelyn's grandson, the boy who'd painted her porch every summer, who'd listened to her stories of resilience. Lucas, sensing Ethan's exhaustion, planned a quiet dinner at their favorite diner, a Greasy Spoon in Wicker Park. Over burgers and milkshakes, Lucas reached across the table, his fingers brushing Ethan's. "You're not alone in this," he said. Those words kept Ethan going. The 75th letter was a turning point. Addressed to his mother, Diane, it was the hardest yet. Diane had stood silently at family gatherings when slurs were slung at Ethan, her love buried under fear of judgment. "Mom," he wrote, "you let them vilify me, but Grandma never did. She told me you cried when I came out, not from shame, but because you were scared for me. Why didn't you fight for me?" Writing those words broke Ethan, tears staining the page. Lucas sat beside him, silent but present, his hand a steady weight on Ethan's shoulder. Mailing that letter felt like sending a piece of his heart into the void. Responses began to shift. Cousin Sarah, now an ally, forwarded Ethan's letters to her siblings, urging them to read with open minds. A distant aunt, Clara, sent a handwritten note. "I didn't know Evelyn supported you so fiercely. I was wrong to stay silent." Each small victory fueled Ethan's resolve, but the family's core, Uncle Robert, Aunt Margaret, and their allies, remained unyielding. They hired a lawyer, threatening to sue Ethan for defamation. Lucas, ever practical, suggested they consult a lawyer of their own. They found Anna, a sharp-witted attorney in Chicago who specialized in estate disputes. "You've got a case," Anna said, her eyes scanning the will. "Evelyn's reasoning reeks of coercion. We just need proof." Ethan and Lucas dove into research, scouring Evelyn's old emails and letters for clues. Late one night, in a box of Evelyn's belongings Ethan had kept, they found a journal entry from 2 years prior. "Robert's been pressuring me about Ethan. Says he's a disgrace. I don't believe it, but they're wearing me down." Ethan's heart sank. His grandmother hadn't betrayed him willingly. She'd been manipulated. The discovery lit a fire in him. The next batch of letters, numbers 76 to 100, revealed this truth, quoting Evelyn's own words. "You pressured her," he wrote to Uncle Robert. "You turned her love for me into shame. That's on you." The family's reaction was explosive. Uncle Robert called a family meeting at the Lake Forest mansion, demanding Ethan stop. Ethan refused to attend, but Sarah, now his advocate, went in his place. She texted him updates. "They're rattled. Keep going." Lucas suggested a strategic pause, to let the family stew in the truth. They spent the weekend in their apartment, cooking together, watching old movies, and stealing moments of normalcy. But Ethan's mind never strayed far from the fight. He wrote the 101st letter to his cousin Mark, who'd once been his best friend before cutting contact after Ethan came out. "You used to sneak me beers at family barbecues," Ethan wrote. "What changed? Not me, your courage did." Mark's response came a week later, a shaky voicemail. "I didn't know how to handle it, Ethan. I'm sorry. It was the first crack in Mark's armor, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope. He and Lucas celebrated quietly, sharing a bottle of cheap wine on their balcony, the Chicago skyline glittering below. We're getting through, Lucas said, his smile bright, but Ethan knew the hardest part was coming. The family was fracturing, and the next letters would target the heart of their resistance. The lawyer who drafted Evelyn's will, and the secrets he might hold about her final days. The lawyer, Gregory Holt, was the family's gatekeeper, a man whose crisp suits and colder demeanor had intimidated Ethan since childhood. Letter 110 was addressed to him, a bold move Anna had cautioned against but Ethan insisted on. Mr. Holt, he wrote, you drafted a will that erased me. Did you know Grandma was pressured? Her journal says you met with Uncle Robert weekly before she died. Ethan sent the letter certified mail, ensuring Holt couldn't ignore it. Lucas, ever cautious, warned, this could backfire. But Ethan felt alive, his pen a weapon against years of silence. Holt's response was swift, a cease and desist letter, accusing Ethan of harassment. But it was too late. The family was unraveling. Sarah and Mark, now allies, began sharing Ethan's letters on social media, tagging distant relatives and even local Lake Forest groups. The Carter name, once synonymous with wealth and respectability, became a topic of gossip. Ethan's letters painted a vivid picture. A family built on Evelyn's strength, now crumbling under their own prejudice. He wrote of her quiet acts of rebellion, donating to LGBTQ+ charities, attending pride events in secret. She was proud of me, Ethan wrote in letter 120, sent to all 145 recipients. You stole that from her. The pressure mounted. Uncle Robert organized another family meeting, this time inviting Ethan. Against Lucas's advice, Ethan went, driven by a need to face them. The Lake Forest mansion loomed as he pulled up, its ivy-covered walls a reminder of childhood summers. Inside, the family sat in tense silence. Robert at the head, Margaret glaring, Sarah and Mark offering small nods of support. You've gone too far, Robert barked. This stops now. Ethan stood tall, his voice steady. You stopped loving Grandma's truth when it didn't suit you. I'm just reminding you who she was. The room erupted. Accusations, tears, and, from Sarah, a defense of Ethan that silenced the rest. She held up one of his letters, her voice shaking. He's right. Grandma loved him. We failed her. Mark nodded, and for the first time, Ethan saw doubt in Robert's eyes. Driving home, Ethan felt a strange mix of triumph and grief. Lucas was waiting, his arms open. You were brave, he said, kissing Ethan's forehead. That night, they lay in bed, talking about the future. A future where Ethan's fight might change more than just his family. Letters 121 to 130 focused on healing. Ethan shifted his tone, urging the family to remember Evelyn's values. Love, resilience, truth. He wrote of her laughter, her fierce debates at dinner, her belief in second chances. Responses trickled in, some apologetic, others defensive. Cousin Laura, once hostile, sent a letter of her own. I didn't understand. I want to. Ethan and Lucas read it together, hope flickering. Anna, their lawyer, uncovered more. Holt had been paid a hefty sum by Robert before the will was finalized. We've got him, Anna said. Keep writing. Ethan's 131st letter was to the entire family, a call to action. Meet me at the lake where Grandma scattered Granddad's ashes, he wrote. Let's talk. Not as enemies, but as Carters. He and Lucas spent the night before preparing, nervous but determined. The lake was where Ethan had come out to Evelyn, where she'd hugged him and said, "You're enough." Now it would be where he faced his family, armed with 145 letters and a love that refused to be denied. The lake shimmered under a late autumn sun, its surface a mirror for Ethan's racing heart. He stood on the dock, Lucas by his side, as cars pulled up one by one. Sarah and Mark arrived first, their faces nervous but supportive. Then came Laura, then Clara, and finally, reluctantly, Robert and Margaret. Not everyone showed. Paul and a few others stayed away. But the turnout was more than Ethan had dared hope. He clutched the final 14 letters, each one a plea for reconciliation, and began to speak. "Grandma loved us all," he said, his voice carrying over the water. "But you let her down when you let hate win." Robert scoffed, but Sarah stepped forward, holding up Ethan's 131st letter. "He's right," she said. "We've been hiding behind lies." She turned to Ethan, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner." One by one, others spoke. Some apologized, others admitted their shame. Margaret stayed silent, her face a mask, but Robert's shoulders slumped, his defiance cracking. Ethan handed out the final letters, each one recounting a memory of Evelyn's love for the family, urging them to rebuild what they'd broken. The meeting wasn't a fairy tale. Voices rose, old wounds reopened, but for the first time, Ethan felt heard. Lucas squeezed his hand, a silent reminder of their shared strength. As the family dispersed, Sarah hugged Ethan tightly. "You changed us," she whispered. Back home, Ethan and Lucas collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but hopeful. Anna called with news. Holt had agreed to testify about Robert's influence on the will, citing undue pressure. The inheritance fight wasn't over, but Ethan felt a shift. He wasn't just fighting for money anymore, but for truth. The final letters, 132 to 145, were Ethan's most vulnerable. He wrote of his love for Lucas, how they'd built a life despite the family's rejection. He wrote of Evelyn's pride in him, how she'd slip him cash for art supplies when his parents refused. "You can't erase me," he wrote in the last letter sent to all. "Grandma didn't. She loved me, and I'm still a Carter." Responses were mixed, some warm, some cold, but the tide was turning. Mark invited Ethan and Lucas to dinner, a small gesture that felt monumental. Laura sent a photo of herself at a pride event, a tentative olive branch. Ethan and Lucas took a weekend trip to the lake, just the two of them, to reflect. They stood on the same dock where Ethan had faced his family, the sunset painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. "We did it," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan nodded, leaning into him. The fight wasn't over, but the letters had done more than expose secrets. They'd sparked change. Anna's case was gaining traction, and the family was beginning to heal, one painful step at a time. Ethan felt Evelyn's presence in the breeze, her love a quiet strength guiding him forward. The courtroom was sterile, its air heavy with anticipation. Ethan sat beside Anna, Lucas's hand a steady anchor under the table. Holt's testimony had been damning. Robert's pressure on Evelyn was documented in emails, meetings, and a late-night phone call where she'd sounded distressed. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, ruled in Ethan's favor. The will's clause disinheriting him was deemed invalid due to coercion. Ethan was awarded his share of the estate, not just money, but the Lake Forest mansion, where Evelyn's rose garden still bloomed. The victory was bittersweet. Money couldn't erase the pain of Evelyn's final act, however coerced. But Ethan felt her love restored, her legacy reclaimed. He and Lucas moved into the mansion, not to flaunt their win, but to honor Evelyn. They turned the estate into a community space, hosting art workshops and LGBTQ+ support groups. Sarah and Mark helped, their presence a bridge to a family slowly mending. Margaret sent a stiff apology letter, which Ethan accepted, though trust would take time. Robert remained distant, but Ethan didn't need his approval anymore. One spring evening, Ethan and Lucas stood in the rose garden, the air sweet with blooms. Ethan proposed, his voice trembling as he slipped a simple band onto Lucas's finger. "You carried me through this," he said. Lucas, tears in his eyes, nodded. "Always will." Their wedding was small, held by the lake, with Sarah, Mark, and a few cousins in attendance. The family wasn't whole, but it was healing, each step a testament to Ethan's 145 letters. Years later, Ethan found Evelyn's old journal in a drawer, its pages worn but cherished. A new entry caught his eye, written in her shaky hand. "Ethan, my brightest star, forgive me. I love you." He closed the book, tears falling, and felt her presence. Her love, her pride, her strength. The letters hadn't just shaken the family. They'd rebuilt it, not on wealth or prejudice, but on truth and love. Ethan and Lucas stood hand in hand, their future bright, knowing Evelyn's legacy lived on in them.